We arrogantly thought the humans would be easy to defeat, but as their captain stared me down on the view screen, I realized we may have made a fatal mistake. Lieutenant Commander Matthew Ramos stood rigidly on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, the human battlecruiser's viewports revealing the vast star-flecked void of space. As an Elysian admiral, I sneered contemptuously at Ramos's image on my ship's main display. "Your species' arrogance knows no bounds, Ramos," I spat. "Did you really think hiding behind your borders after slaughtering our peace envoy would protect you? The Elysian Imperium's might is unrivaled. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." Ramos met my glare without flinching. He smiled coldly. "You seem to have mistaken human isolationism for weakness, Fornax. We do not start fights, but we will be the ones to finish this one." I scoffed and closed the comlink. Ramos turned to his bridge crew, barking orders to prepare for the inevitable Elysian attack. He knew our avian technology was highly advanced. He knew our armada vastly outnumbered the human fleet. Alarms blared, signaling the approach of dozens of Elysian warships dropping out of hyperspace. Ramos set his jaw resolutely. In our arrogance, we Elysians had gravely underestimated humanity's iron will to survive. We failed to consider the unwavering solidarity between Earth's far-flung colonies. This first engagement would be the start of a war raging across multiple star systems, with the very future of the human race at stake. If the humans failed here, their entire species would be enslaved or exterminated without mercy. But if the humans triumphed against the odds, it would be the first step in throwing off the shackles of our oppressive Elysian Imperium, the first spark in igniting the flames of human resistance across the galaxy. The Elysian fleet descended upon the human defenses in a relentless onslaught. Their sleek, state-of-the-art warships unleashed a firestorm of plasma cannons and antimatter torpedoes, battering the UES Indomitable and its support vessels. The human ships shook violently as the enemy barrage struck their hulls. Explosions ripped through several vessels, reducing them to fields of debris. Other ships listed aimlessly, venting atmosphere from gaping wounds. Yet as the battle raged on, the Elysians began to notice something unexpected. The human ships refused to die. Even after sustaining heavy damage, they continued fighting with dogged determination. Ramos realized their ships' redundant systems and reinforced armor allowed them to absorb punishment that would have destroyed Elysian craft. "All ships focus fire on their support vessels," Ramos ordered over the comm. "Draw their attention and whittle them down." The human fleet shifted tactics, their battered warships acting as shields for the more vulnerable ships. They soaked up the brunt of the Elysian assault, slowly chipping away at the enemy's numbers. Seizing an opportunity, Ramos gathered a squad of Marines and personally led a boarding party onto a crippled Elysian dreadnought. They cut their way inside, engaging the avian crew in brutal close-quarters combat. The humans' superior strength and adaptability proved decisive against the Elysians, who faltered without their technological advantage. Fighting deck by deck, Ramos and his Marines battled their way to the dreadnought's bridge. There they confronted Admiral Fornax himself. The two leaders clashed in a desperate hand-to-hand struggle, trading blows with savage intensity. Ramos, driven by raw determination, finally overpowered Fornax and neutralized him. With their admiral captured and their dreadnought lost, the Elysian forces fled the battlefield in disarray. The human ships, battered but unbroken, had triumphed against overwhelming odds. Ramos, bleeding from a dozen wounds but still standing tall, addressed his fleet. "This battle is ours, but the war has only begun," he declared grimly. "Regroup and prepare for their inevitable return. We will show them the true strength of humanity." In the brig of the UES Indomitable, Ramos paced restlessly before a restrained Admiral Fornax. The captured Elysian leader refused to meet Ramos's eyes, his once proud bearing diminished by defeat and captivity. "Why?" Ramos demanded, his voice echoing off the cold metal walls. "Why attack us without provocation? What could possibly justify this war?" Fornax remained silent for a long moment, his avian features inscrutable. Finally he spoke, his words laced with a mixture of bitterness and desperation. "Neutronium," he spat. "Your species sits atop vast reserves of it, the only significant source in the known galaxy. Without it, our technology, our very way of life, will crumble." Ramos's eyes widened in understanding. The rare mineral was the key to the Elysians' advanced technology, and they would stop at nothing to secure it. The stakes of the war had just become clearer and far more dire. Leaving Fornax to his captivity, Ramos strode onto the bridge, his mind racing with the implications of this revelation. He knew that the Elysians would not rest until they had seized control of humanity's neutronium reserves. The war was bound to escalate, and Ramos needed to act decisively. "Admiral, we've identified a high-value target," a young officer reported, pulling up a holographic display of a heavily fortified Elysian installation. Their primary neutronium processing facility, located in the heart of their home system. Ramos studied the display, a plan already forming in his mind. If they could strike at the heart of the Elysian war machine, they could buy humanity precious time and perhaps even turn the tide of the war. "Assemble a strike force," Ramos ordered, his voice filled with grim determination. "Our most advanced ships, our best Marines. We're going to hit them where it hurts." Leaving a portion of his fleet to defend human territory, Ramos led the strike force on a covert mission deep into Elysian space. Using captured Elysian codes and state-of-the-art stealth technology, they slipped past enemy patrols and sensor nets, drawing ever closer to their target. As the processing facility came into view, a massive installation bristling with defenses, Ramos knew that the coming battle would be the most challenging of his career. But he also knew that the fate of humanity rested on the success of this mission. "All ships commence attack," Ramos commanded, his voice steady over the comm. "Marines, prepare for landing. Let's show these bastards what happens when they mess with the human race." The strike force burst into action, human ships engaging the surprised Elysian defenders with a ferocity born of desperation. Missiles and energy beams crisscrossed the void, ships on both sides erupting into flames as the battle raged. Under the cover of the space battle, Ramos led his hand-picked team of Marines in a daring assault on the facility itself. They breached the outer defenses, fighting their way through the twisting corridors and cavernous chambers of the installation. The Elysians, caught off guard by the audacity of the human attack, rallied their forces and mounted a fierce defense. But Ramos and his Marines were relentless, driven by a determination to see their mission through no matter the cost. In a climactic confrontation deep within the heart of the facility, Ramos and his team battled their way to the main reactor core. Despite heavy resistance from the Elysian defenders, they managed to plant their explosives and sabotage the core, setting off a chain reaction that would destroy the entire installation. As the facility began to tear itself apart around them, Ramos and his surviving Marines fought their way back to their waiting ships, but as they prepared to withdraw, a new wave of Elysian ships dropped out of hyperspace, led by none other than a vengeful Admiral Fornax, who had somehow escaped captivity. Caught between the exploding facility and the incoming Elysian reinforcements, Ramos knew that not all of them would be making it back. With a heavy heart, he ordered the bulk of the strike force to withdraw, while he and a handful of ships stayed behind to cover their escape. In a desperate rearguard action, Ramos and his remaining ships fought with the fury of the damned, holding off the Elysian counterattack long enough for the majority of the human force to make the jump to hyperspace. But the cost was high, with Ramos's ship taking heavy damage, and many of his brave crew paying the ultimate price. Battered, bloodied, but unbroken, the remnants of the strike force limped back to human space, the glow of their Pyrrhic victory tempered by the weight of their losses. They had struck a crippling blow against the Elysian war machine, but Ramos knew that the war was far from over. As he looked out at the stars, he could only wonder what sacrifices the future would demand in the name of humanity's survival. In the wake of the devastating strike on their neutronium processing facility, the Elysians' tactics turned even more brutal and desperate. waves of Elysian ships began targeting human civilian populations, raining down plasma fire on colonies and habitats with cold, calculating precision. Rubble and ash choked the air as once thriving settlements burned, their inhabitants scrambling for shelter amid the chaos. Elysian ground forces stormed through the breached defenses, their avian features twisted with rage as they cut down fleeing civilians without mercy. Newly promoted Admiral Ramos gritted his teeth as reports of the atrocities flooded in. The weight of his new responsibilities hung heavy on his shoulders. He now faced the monumental task of safeguarding humanity's vulnerable civilian population while still pressing the advantage against the Elysians. Poring over holomaps and tactical readouts, Ramos devised a two-pronged counter-strategy. He ordered the immediate construction of a network of fortified safe zones, each one a bristling bastion equipped with the most advanced defense systems and garrisoned by battle-hardened Marines. Across human-controlled space, these sanctuary cities rose swiftly, their towering walls and shimmering energy shields a beacon of hope for terrified civilians. Fleets of transports ferried endless streams of refugees to safety, while grim-faced Marines stood watch over the expanding safe zones. But even as he shored up humanity's defenses, Ramos refused to let the Elysians regain their footing. He unleashed a relentless series of surgical strikes deep into enemy territory, each one a lightning raid targeting critical Elysian military infrastructure and supply routes. Cloaked human ships slipped past enemy lines, disgorging elite Marine strike teams that hit hard and fast. Elysian outposts erupted into flames, their defenders caught flat-footed by the human onslaught. Explosions lit the skies as stockpiles of weapons and supplies detonated, the shockwaves rippling through the enemy ranks. Yet even as Ramos's bold raids sowed chaos and disruption, a darker revelation awaited. During a daring assault on a fortified Elysian base, Ramos and his strike team stumbled upon a trove of encrypted data that pointed to a secret research facility and a weapon that could spell doom for the human race. Codenamed Project Nemesis, the Elysian bioweapon targeted the very genetic structure of human DNA, engineered to unravel the double helix and trigger cascading cellular collapse. If deployed, it would mean an agonizing, inescapable death for every man, woman, and child in human space. His blood running cold, Ramos realized the Elysians were preparing Nemesis as a final genocidal gambit. With their conventional forces facing defeat, they would sooner annihilate humanity than accept their own downfall. Racing against a ticking clock, Ramos handpicked an elite team of his most skilled Marines and brilliant xenogeneticists. Time was of the essence. They had to infiltrate the Project Nemesis research facility, shut down the bioweapon, and destroy all traces of its existence. In a pulse-pounding covert op, Ramos and his crack unit breached the facility's multi-layered defenses, weaving through a labyrinth of automated kill zones and fanatical Elysian soldiers. They fought for every blood-soaked inch, driven by the knowledge that the fate of their species hung in the balance. Breaching the sealed doors of the central laboratory, they found themselves face-to-face with the mastermind behind Nemesis, a coldly brilliant Elysian scientist who regarded them with utter contempt. Even as Ramos leveled his plasma rifle at the avian's head, the scientist laughed. "You're too late, human," he sneered. "Nemesis is complete. The prototype is already en route to a testing site. Soon your kind will be nothing but a memory, and the Elysian Imperium will rise unopposed." Plasma fire lit the lab as Ramos and his team fought their way out, the base alarms howling around them. They barely made it to their waiting stealth ship before the Elysian security forces swarmed their position, a hail of energy bolts scorching their heels. But even as they blasted free of the facility's blast radius, Ramos knew their fight was far from over. Somewhere out in the vast expanse of space, a ticking bomb waited, ready to erase humanity from the cosmos. It would take every ounce of ingenuity, courage, and sheer unflinching resolve to hunt it down before the unthinkable could occur. As his battered team caught their breath in the dim confines of the ship, Ramos stared out into the starry void, his eyes hardened with purpose. No matter the cost, no matter the sacrifice, they would stop Nemesis, or die trying. The survival of the human race depended on it. Time was running out. The intel Ramos's team had gathered pointed to an unthinkable horror. The Elysians were on the cusp of testing a devastating bioweapon, one that could erase humanity from existence. Project Nemesis had to be stopped at any cost. Ramos pored over the star charts, his eyes bloodshot from exhaustion. There, a remote asteroid field deep in Elysian space, the perfect place to conceal a secret weapons facility. It had to be the testing site for Nemesis. He slammed a fist on the console. "There's our target," Ramos growled. "Prep the fleet, we're going in hot and fast. This ends now." Within hours, the pride of the human fleet was underway, their hulls bristling with weaponry. Ramos handpicked a strike team of his most lethal Marines, each one a battle-hardened veteran driven by grim purpose. As they neared the asteroid field, sensors lit up with hostile contacts. Elysian ships swarmed like angry hornets, unleashing a storm of plasma fire. The human fleet returned salvo for salvo, the void lighting up with deadly exchanges. "Punch a hole through their defenses," Ramos ordered, his voice steel. "The strike team is going in." A small stealth shuttle darted from the human flagship's hangar bay, Ramos at the helm. They wove through the chaos of the space battle, dodging debris and enemy fire. The asteroid loomed ahead, its surface pockmarked with fortified structures. They touched down hard, the shuttle's hatch blowing open. Ramos leapt out, his Marines fanning out behind him. "Move out," he barked. "We find that weapon and we bury it." They carved a path of destruction through the facility, plasma rifles blazing. Elysian defenders fell before their relentless advance, the stench of ozone and seared flesh choking the air. Deeper and deeper they pushed, every second ticking by like a countdown to oblivion. At last they breached the central chamber, a cavernous vault housing a sinister-looking device. Ramos's heart clenched. Project Nemesis, the doomsday weapon poised to annihilate his species. A cold, familiar voice cut through the air. "You're too late, Ramos." Admiral Fornax stepped from the shadows, a unit of elite Elysian soldiers at his back. Ramos raised his rifle, hatred boiling in his veins. "Fornax," he spat, "I should have killed you when I had the chance." The Elysian admiral's eyes glittered with malice. "And now your failure will doom your pathetic race." With a wordless cry of rage, Ramos lunged at his nemesis. They clashed in a whirlwind of desperate violence as their soldiers ripped into each other. Plasma bolts flew, bodies crumpled, blood spattered the deck. Ramos and Fornax traded bone-crunching blows, the Elysian's avian features twisted with hate. Ramos fought with the strength of a man possessed, driven by the weight of billions of lives. In a final wrenching effort, Ramos drove his combat blade into Fornax's chest. The admiral staggered, his eyes wide with shock, but even as he fell, his clawed hand slammed down on a control panel. "If we die," Fornax choked out, dark blood bubbling from his beak, "we die together." A klaxon blared, red lights pulsing. Ramos's head snapped up, his blood running cold. The countdown to detonation had begun. Project Nemesis was activating, its destructive energies building to a lethal crescendo. "Zet charges on the reactor," Ramos roared to his remaining Marines. "We're blowing this place to hell." They raced against the clock, the air shimmering with the build-up of energy. Ramos worked frantically, his hands slick with sweat and blood. Just as the device began to pulse with a sickly green light, he slammed the detonator. A series of explosions rocked the facility, fire blossoming through its structure. Ramos and his Marines sprinted for their lives, the heat of the blast licking at their backs. They barely made it to their shuttle before the entire asteroid disintegrated in a blinding flash. Ramos slumped against the bulkhead, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His Marines lay broken and bleeding around him, the price of their victory etched in their flesh. The shuttle tumbled away, buffeted by the shock waves of the destruction they had wrought. Darkness crept in at the edges of Ramos's vision as his injuries took their toll. The last thing he saw before unconsciousness claimed him was the distant glimmer of human ships, the remnants of the battle still playing out against the stars. He awoke to the sterile white of a medbay, his body racked with pain. A medic leaned over him, relief in his eyes. "Admiral Ramos," he said urgently, "you did it. The Elysians. They've surrendered. It's over." Ramos closed his eyes, a wave of emotion crashing over him. It was over. Humanity had prevailed. But the cost had been so very high. He thought of his fallen soldiers, of the world scarred by the ravages of war. The Elysian War would forever be a gaping wound in the history of his people, a testament to the depths of sacrifice and the heights of courage. And as Ramos began the long, painful process of healing, he knew that the future would demand even more from him. The burden of leadership settled on his shoulders like a mantle of iron. He would bear it, for the memory of the fallen, for the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Humanity would rebuild, would find its place among the stars once more. And he, Admiral Matthew Ramos, would be there to guide them through whatever trials lay ahead. It was his duty, his penance, his solemn vow. The scars of war would fade, but the lessons would endure. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.